The window pane rattled violently against the wooden frame. It was the first bitter winter wind of the year. It crept through the tiny cracks and instantly chilled the whole room. The temperature must have dropped 10 degrees in a single hour. I sat on the edge of the couch, rubbing my cold hands together. Then, I heard it. A soft, fragile sneeze came from under the heavy blankets in the bedroom. My heart immediately dropped into my stomach. I rushed to the doorway and peeked inside. My little girl, Mia, was curled up into a tight ball. She has always struggled when the seasons change. Her tiny lungs just can't handle the sudden drop in temperature. The winter air always brings a nasty cough that keeps her up all night. I walked over and gently pulled the thick blanket up to her chin. She shivered slightly in her sleep and let out another quiet sneeze. I felt a massive wave of helplessness wash over me. I smoothed her hair back from her forehead. It felt a little warm. Panic started to set in. When her mom was still around, this was the exact moment the house would fill with a sweet, comforting smell. A hot bowl of pumpkin and lotus seed soup was the ultimate cure. It was the one thing that always warmed her up from the inside out. It stopped those awful winter colds right in their tracks. But I don't know how to make it. I looked down at my hands under the dim hallway light. They are rough, covered in calluses, and permanently stained with engine grease. These hands know how to swing a 20-pound sledgehammer. They know how to fix a broken transmission in the freezing rain. They have absolutely no idea how to navigate a cutting board or balance delicate spices. I have always been the guy who brings home takeout or burns frozen pizzas. What warm dish do you usually cook for your kids and family when the cold weather sets in? Please share your sweet stories down in the comments below. I swore to learn all the gentlest things in this world, to personally cook warm meals and protect my daughter as she grows up. If you believe in the power of a clumsy but sincere love, please hit that subscribe button. I couldn't just stand there doing nothing. Another soft cough echoed from the bed, a little deeper this time. That was it. That was all the motivation I needed. I turned around, rolled up my flannel sleeves, and marched straight into the kitchen. It felt like I was stepping onto an alien battlefield. The bright overhead light buzzed as I flicked it on. I opened the pantry and stared at the shelves. I pulled out a heavy, stubborn pumpkin that we bought at the farmer's market last week. I placed it on the counter. It looked like a solid rock. I grabbed the biggest chef's knife we owned. The handle felt completely awkward in my thick, clumsy fingers. I tried to peel the tough green skin, but the blade slipped dangerously close to my thumb. I cursed under my breath. I ended up chopping off huge chunks of the good orange flesh, along with the skin. By the time I finished, the kitchen counter looked like a disaster zone. The pieces of pumpkin were completely uneven. Some were the size of golf balls, while others were tiny, thin slivers. Next came the lotus seeds. I grabbed a handful of dried lotus seeds from a glass jar. My clumsy, calloused grip failed me once again. Half of them slipped through my fingers. They hit the counter and scattered across the wooden floor like little wooden marbles. They rolled under the fridge and the stove. I let out a heavy sigh, got down on my hands and knees, and started picking them up one by one. I felt ridiculous. I am a grown man who can rebuild a V8 car engine from scratch in a weekend. Yet, a simple vegetable and some tiny seeds are completely defeating me. But I knew I had to push through this frustration. There is a very specific reason why this soup is so important right now. Pumpkin is packed with vitamin A and essential antioxidants. It is absolutely crucial for strengthening a child's immune system. It builds a natural shield to protect their delicate respiratory tract from the biting cold air. And the lotus seeds aren't just there to make it taste good. They have natural, calming, and restorative properties. They soothe irritated lungs and help kids sleep soundly through harsh, freezing winter nights. It is literally a bowl of natural medicine, disguised as a delicious, creamy dinner. I finally got the lopsided pumpkin pieces and the rinsed lotus seeds into a pot of water. I turned the electric stove on. Maybe I turned it on way too high. Within minutes, the water was boiling over aggressively. It hissed loudly as the starchy water hit the glowing red burner. Smoke started to fill the kitchen. I panicked and slammed the heat down, almost turning the dial off completely. I grabbed a wooden spoon and started stirring aggressively to stop it from sticking to the bottom. I took a small spoonful to taste the broth. I blew on it and took a sip. It was terrible. It tasted like hot, watery dirt. I had completely forgotten to add any salt or seasoning. So, I grabbed the salt shaker and poured some in. I tasted it again. Now it was way too salty. I stared at the bubbling orange mess and felt a tight, painful knot form in my throat. I felt like a total failure. The house felt so big and empty, without her mom's laughter. I wiped the sweat off my forehead with the back of my hand. I looked at the clock on the microwave. It was already past 8 in the evening. I just wanted to give her the same comfort she used to have when her mom was here. I wanted to prove that even without a mother, this house could still be warm and safe. What does it mean for a father to brave the kitchen and personally prepare meals for his child? How does it affect the bond of a family? Please leave your polite and brief thoughts in the comments. I pray to God to light a warm fire in the kitchen of every single parent household, so no one has to endure the freezing loneliness of this world. Please hit subscribe to help us light up this kind shared home together. I stood there for a long time, just staring into that pot of ruined, salty soup. I wanted to grab the pot and throw it across the room. I wanted to give up, order some greasy takeout, and call it a night. But quitting just isn't in my blood. I have never been the kind of guy who walks away just because something gets hard. If I can figure out how to rebuild a shattered transmission by trial and error, I can figure out how to boil a vegetable. Failing the first time just meant I knew exactly what not to do the second time. I grabbed the pot handles, walked over to the sink, and poured the whole mess down the drain. I scrubbed the pot clean until the stainless steel shined again. The water from the tap was freezing cold against my knuckles, but it actually helped clear my head. I dried my hands on a kitchen towel and took a deep breath. I walked back over to the pantry and found the other half of the pumpkin. This time, I didn't rush. I didn't treat it like a chore I just needed to get through. I held the chef's knife differently, gripping it closer to the base of the blade for better control, exactly the way I hold my precision tools in the garage. I peeled the tough skin off slowly and carefully. The pieces still weren't perfectly square like the ones you see in restaurants, but they were decent. They were uniform enough to cook evenly. I went back to the glass jar of lotus seeds. Instead of trying to grab a huge, careless handful, I cupped my hand and gently poured them out. Not a single one hit the floor this time. I rinsed them under warm water, rubbing them gently between my rough fingers. I put the pumpkin and the seeds back into the clean pot and added fresh water. This time, I didn't crank the heat all the way up to maximum. I remembered watching Mia's mom in the kitchen years ago. She never rushed things. She always said that good soup needs time to figure out what it wants to be. I turned the dial to a low, steady medium. I stood right there in front of the stove, leaning against the counter, and just watched. I didn't look at my phone. I didn't check the football scores. I just kept my eyes on the water. Slowly, little bubbles started to form at the edges. The water turned into a gentle, rolling simmer. I didn't use a measuring spoon for the seasoning. I realized that following a rigid formula wasn't going to work for me. I just took a pinch of salt, rubbed it between my fingers, and let it fall into the pot. I added a tiny bit of sugar to balance it out. Then, I grabbed a wooden spoon and began to stir. I stirred slowly, making figure eights in the broth. After about 20 minutes, something incredible started to happen. The hard chunks of pumpkin began to soften and break down. They melted into the water, turning the broth into a rich, vibrant orange color. The lotus seeds expanded, becoming plump and tender. And then, the smell hit me. It was that sweet, earthy, comforting aroma that used to fill this house every winter. The steam rose from the pot, curling up toward the ceiling and fogging up the kitchen windows. The bitter cold wind was still howling outside, rattling the glass panes. But inside this kitchen, the chill was completely gone. It felt incredibly warm. I took a clean spoon, scooped up a tiny bit of the golden broth, and blew on it. I closed my eyes and took a sip. It wasn't perfect. It probably wasn't exactly like her mom used to make it, but it was good. It was really, really good. It tasted rich and sweet and full of warmth. I turned off the stove and let out a breath I didn't even know I was holding. I felt a strange wave of relief wash over my tired shoulders. I reached into the cupboard and pulled out Mia's favorite little ceramic bowl. It has a cartoon rabbit painted on the bottom. I ladled the thick, steaming soup into the bowl, making sure to get plenty of the soft lotus seeds. I grabbed a spoon and carefully walked down the dark hallway toward her bedroom. The floorboards creaked under my heavy boots. I pushed her door open with my elbow. The room was dark, except for the small nightlight plugged into the wall. Mia was awake, propped up against her pillows, coughing softly into her fist. Her little nose was red, and she looked so exhausted. I walked over and sat on the edge of her bed. "Hey, sweetie," I whispered. "I brought you something." She blinked her tired eyes and looked at the bowl in my hands. The steam floated up in the dim light. "Mommy's soup?" she asked, her voice raspy and weak. I felt a tight squeeze in my chest. "No, kiddo," I said softly. "It's Daddy's soup." I tried my best. I scooped up a small spoonful, blew on it until it was just warm, and held it out to her. She leaned forward and took a sip. For a second, she just sat there, smacking her lips together. I held my breath, waiting for her to push it away. Instead, her eyes widened. She reached out with both of her small hands and grabbed my wrist, guiding the spoon back for another bite. She ate the next spoonful eagerly, and then another, and another. I sat there for 20 minutes, just feeding her, watching the color slowly return to her pale cheeks. The warmth of the soup was doing exactly what it was supposed to do. It was soothing her throat and warming her up from the inside out. When the bowl was completely empty, she laid back against her pillows. She let out a soft, contented sigh. She looked up at me, her eyes heavy with sleep, and smiled. "You are the best chef in the whole world, Daddy," she mumbled. She closed her eyes, and within minutes, she was fast asleep. Her breathing was steady, calm, and completely quiet. No more coughing, no more sneezing. I took the empty bowl and walked back out to the kitchen. I set it down on the wooden table and just looked at my hands. They were still rough. They were still covered in calluses and old scars. But for the first time, I didn't feel like they were completely useless. I realized that you don't need delicate hands to show someone you love them. You just need hands that refuse to quit. Sometimes, love isn't about doing things perfectly. It is about showing up, making a mess, burning the first batch, and trying again until you get it right. A warm bowl of pumpkin soup can chase away the winter chill, but a father's sweet, stubborn love will warm a child's heart for a lifetime. Please leave a warm wish for good health in the comments below to help heat up our little kitchen.